You have to know this. The fact that I'm here matters. The fact that you're there matters. This is no accident. None of us are.
If you do not have style, you just say, well, here I am, you know, as a human being. How can I express myself?
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
There is no way around. You have to jump.
And we are calling it iPhone.
نريدها قومة ونهضة إسلامية.
I have a dream.
It's about yes we can.
ضيفنا اليوم هو مخرج تهابه الأساطير، القيادات والرؤساء. هو من أخرج أفلاما تروي قصص العظماء وأهم الأحداث في العالم. نال الاعتراف بعدما حاز على جائزة أوسكار، ولكن لم تكن واحدة بل 2 و3. حاز على أكثر من 52 جائزة ورشح للأوسكار لعشرات المرات. بدأ حياته كمحارب في الخطوط الأمامية في فيتنام، واستمر كمحارب خلف الكاميرا. حول صنعة الأفلام من صنعة جالبة للمال إلى صنعة يوصل فيها وجهات نظره. دائما ما يهاجم، دائما ما يعترض على أعماله، ولكنه فرض مواده على الشاشات. فنقطع التذكرة لنتعلم التاريخ بوجهة نظر اوليفر ستون. Are you ready to talk to them at least again?
We'll see, you know, it's always tricky.
After you.
And the winner is Oliver Stone for Midnight Express.
The winner is Oliver Stone.
Oliver Stone, born on the 4th of July.
American boys died over there for nothing, because America learned nothing from the Vietnam War.
The NSA is really tracking every cell phone in the world.
In a hot war, is the U.S. dominant?
Я думаю, что никто бы не пережил.
Try to find not what the crowd wants so that you can be successful, but try instead to find the true inner meaning of your life here on earth. And never give up on your heart in your struggle for peace, decency, and telling the truth. Thank you.
Thank you again, Mr. Stone, for this opportunity. And as I told you before in the office, that we're here trying to redefine different types of power. And we think you are a director and a writer and a producer that reflected power in different types. So, for example, 6 presidents, you had 6 presidents in your movies, that you almost met them all. How do you define power yourself?
Well, I think power for most people would be money and influence, government, statehood. Those are the powers that matter. Oil often can translate to power, but it's how you use it. And some people use power better than others. But, you know, it comes down to military and money, I think. I think there is cultural power, some power in television and film, but I think I've been around long enough to not kid myself. You know, we make a little difference here and there. We can have an impact. I like a good movie that would move people and inspire them, but you know, over time, repetition is what matters, and the controls of the state, which are based on repetition. They say the same, this is our policy, and they will propagandize it, and they can repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. So people do go along in the end, and they are sheep. The resistance, to some degree, and adds up, certainly, and you see instances of it, but very rarely do you have overturning governments and changing policy.
You define yourself as a method director, and you lived a lot of different ways of living. When we thought about this definition, how you defined yourself, we thought of Born on 4th of July is a story about a soldier that is a victim of Vietnam War. Were your story similar to that, because you were a soldier in Vietnam?
I don't know that I would define myself a victim, because I think I survived, and I actually I learned from it. I learned from my experience, and I translated it from myself for other people. and made 3 movies about Vietnam.
Yes.
But and it influenced them to a certain degree. Certainly, the Vietnam War. You see, the problem in America is that it's still divisive. People knew it was a lousy war when we were there. I mean, many people knew it, and protests were everywhere. It was one of the most protested wars. But then over time, memory, history, movies like Born on the 4th of July and Platoon and Heaven and Earth, you know, that's the power of repetition. President Reagan takes office in 1980, and he says to the people, the Vietnam War was a noble effort by the United States to help Vietnam. So he repeats that old, that myth, and he repeats it and repeats it. And I noticed it got picked up by President Clinton, by President Bush certainly, and certainly by Obama. Obama himself, when he went to West Point numerous times and he supported the military, would repeat the same errors of value and judgment that we should have learned from. As a result, America seems to really learn nothing from going to bad wars because we continue to do so.
We'll talk more about your opinions. I saw many posters here showing that how presidents fear your films, or I saw one of those posters there.
A cartoon. Yeah.
So it shows that how President Clinton is worried that you'll film a film about him. Your films, your movies are always related to such things. We want to go back to your early days.
I would love to scare them. It would be great if you could actually affect a change. And the other day, yesterday, somebody told me that they were with President Bush's daughter at a party.
Yes.
And I'd heard this story before, that Mr. Bush, George W.,
yes,
more power to him, actually enjoyed the movie about him.
Mm-hmm.
And he laughed. And in other words, he has a decent sense of humor because he was able to laugh at himself. And I was quite surprised. I thought he might not like it or not see it. But apparently he has seen it and liked it.
Hitchcock said that when it's a feature film, the director is the God. But when it's a documentary, God is the director. You change that equation, I think. you change this equation. You do a biography, you do documentaries with your own point of view.
Yeah, good point. I think Mr. Hitchcock, as much as I admire him, never did a documentary as far as I know. Although some of his films are really shot sometimes like documentary. No, it's important not to be overbearing, but to really, in a documentary, first of all, you have to lay out the facts. Now, everybody knows we omit facts. So everyone has a point of view and they make it favorable. But I do think that there is an objectivity to this thing. And I think if you see Untold History, which was, what we did in Untold History was we reinterpreted a set of facts that have happened in America,
yes,
specifically from World War II to now. And I have never seen that in this form before. And this is why we got tremendously good reviews from progressive historians, the 20 very good top people, but the mainstream, which is the historians from Harvard's, and they're so scared of changing the official interpretation of
But
America.
let me tell you something. Now, you mentioned those names that talked about your book. The first one is President Mikhail Gorbachev.
Yeah.
I met President Mikhail Gorbachev, and I asked him about Putin and his role in Syria. And would he do it in a different way? Because he's a peacemaker. He ended the Cold War. He couldn't talk in a negative way about Putin.
About who?
About Putin. He said it, his point of view, but still he didn't said anything negative about Putin. You had also one of your last projects. You've done a documentary with Putin. You spent more than 20 hours with him. The American market, let's say, or the American newspapers, different people that are involved in politics think that you didn't say one negative thing about Putin in that documentary. Or at least if you said...
I disagree with that, but you have to...
But this is why this is what I'm saying, that he had the chance to say another opinion, but I also gave him a chance to give. So I think those opinions are important, but sometimes is what you believe is more important. So that's why we want to understand more and take you back to your early days. You've been...
Well, I just would like to... Can I...
Yeah, sure.
First of all, I've met Mr. Gorbachev many times. He was a hero in the book Untold History of the United States.
Yes.
He's the single most important statesman of the 1980s insofar as he really brought the world to a new peace. I think we all had great hopes in 1989 that the world would change and the United States would get off its military budgets and aggressiveness, and that now that the Soviet Union was over, there was no reason to continue the American empire. That was a key moment. And of course, in the 1990s, promises were given to Mr. Gorbachev that NATO would not move east by the Americans. And Mr. Clinton broke those promises. Mr. Bush continued. Obama continued. And 13 new countries were added to NATO. So Mr. Gorbachev was reacting to the American treachery of putting NATO around Russia. So when he said that he is supporting Mr. Putin, he's supporting him in that matter, as well as in the breaking of the ABM treaty. Gorbachev is very aware of what America has done since 1989. But he was very critical of Mr. Putin before about his policies, and he was very tough on Putin, and they were not friendly. And as you saw in the film, if you saw the film, Putin talks about Gorbachev and the failures of Gorbachev. So it was, on the contrary, a very transparent and open process where I was talking critically about Mr. Gorbachev and Mr. Putin, and I criticized. I let Mr. Putin know the criticisms that had been made about him. Democracy, this, that in Russia, that he was holding on to power too long, running for a fourth term. I raised all these questions. And I think I got as far as anyone has ever done in the Western world with Mr. Putin, because I thought, very informed, and I asked him very clearly to state positions in Ukraine, Syria, and so forth. And he did so. And we don't hear that in the West. This is what we forget. We do not hear that. And in Egypt, we showed it, the film in Egypt, and you know what? It was one of the highest rated documentaries in the Middle East. The Mediterranean basin, they watched it.
Then why? Why do you think?
Because they care about Syria. They know I think a lot of the Arabic people understand that Syria was going to be a completely failed state.
Yes.
And it was the Russians who stabilized it, and that's very important for the region.
No, I meant why all those attacks on the documentary
Oh, well,
that you've
come
done.
on. You have to understand that Russia in the United States achieved a status of mythical enemy like the devil. Goes back to the Cold War, right after World War II, when we made, and I think it was a false war, Cold War, and I think we made them into the greatest enemy of all time in order to build up our own military economic system. We put a fortune into military. You know the numbers, $800 billion plus this budget year, $800 billion plus. This is more than the other 8 countries behind it combined. 8 countries behind it combined. Russia invests 12% of what we invest in military. And that's not to even talk about the black operations, the things they don't put in the budget. America has been on a war kick since World War II, and it's gotten worse. It's more like an addiction that we have to put more and more money into the Pentagon when we desperately, as a country, need investment in our country, in infrastructure, in health, and welfare, and teaching. We could actually be a country almost as prosperous as Switzerland in a way, and as concerned with domestic issues as any Scandinavian country, but we're not. We're a country that has out of balance with a war fever. And this comes from World War II. And this is what we go into. This is very important to get into. And Mr. Gorbachev, the reason I went over there is to find out what is going on. Why is America on the warpath with Russia? You can't say anything good about Russia, anything. Right now we're talking about Russiagate. They're meddling in our elections. This is all nonsense. Like America is blaming a small power, relatively small, for all these ills in our country. They're saying Russia did it or China did it. This is not good. We have to deal with our own problems, and we have to be responsible about it. Anyway, that's what I was trying to do. I'm trying to help the situation. I was asking questions of Mr. Putin that I think very few people in the West have ever asked him.
You talk about power, you talk about presidents, but still you're better than many. You won Academy Awards. So is that what makes you as a different school of being a director? How do you define your school?
My school? I'll write a book about it. No, I studied film. I went to film school. I was not intended to be a film. I didn't know anything about film when I came back from Vietnam. I was a lost soldier, another one. I was on the GI Bill because they paid for my education. The tuition, GI Bill from World War II, paid for me to go to NYU, New York University Film School. And I was a lost young man. And frankly, somebody said you can go to college and you can get a degree in watching movies. I mean, it was a great idea. It seemed like fun. And I needed, it stabilized me. I had always been interested in writing before the war. And I continued to write in film school in scripts.
Yes.
Going to film script writing classes and stuff. And I wrote many scripts. And after the film school, like many people, I drove a taxi, I was a messenger, I had many jobs. I worked in a sports film company for a while. And I wrote scripts every year. I wrote 2 scripts. I wrote about 11, 12, 13 scripts and many treatments. And one of them got picked up in Hollywood. It was about Patty Hearst kidnapping. And I got in, and one thing led to another. And then before you knew it, I wrote Platoon, I wrote Born on the 4th of July. None of them got made. And then I got an assignment to do a small, low-budget picture called Midnight Express in 1978, 77. And Midnight Express became a huge hit internationally, huge hit for Columbia Pictures, and got an Oscar for it, my first Oscar out of nowhere. And one thing leads to another. I had many failures. I mean, I had many disappointments and some successes. And I wrote Scarface, which many people, I think in the Middle East, love Scarface. A lot of people do. And they like the guns and the shooting and the cocaine. And then
we use them less than Americans.
That's for sure. That's for sure. And Conan the Barbarian and so forth. And then eventually, Salvador, I wrote and directed. And then Platoon was an international hit, like Midnight Express, went everywhere. Big, big for me. It transformed my situation overnight. And from then on, I decided, I knew the film business enough to, I said to myself, you better, if you're on top, if you can get to that place, you better make films, the hard ones, because if you make the easy films, try to make the films that are challenging, because you don't have long if you don't,
Yes.
they're going to knock you out. I really did 10 films in 10 years, literally. It was tough films, like
Every year and a half. You did
Born on the 4th of July, JFK,
Yeah.
Natural Born Killers, they never would have done unless I'd had some power, So I knew power, and I used it to the best of my ability. And Nixon was an extremely difficult film. It didn't do well, but I loved that movie. And it was, as you said earlier, a study of power and a study of man in power, the president.
Yes. Talking about not doing well or the popularity of movies, I had the chance to interview 3 Nobel Prize winners. F.W. de Klerk, and this season with President Santos from Colombia.
Santos, yes.
Yes, and Mikhail Gorbachev. They all did huge impact on their countries, especially when it comes to peace. But their popularity is not that huge. How do you see it linked? Why is popularity against peace? It's always...
That's a simple question. I mean, you know that Mr. Gorbachev is not admired in the in Russia because he lost control of the government, and
Yes.
It exploded on him. I mean, you have to understand that they'd been spending money, like the United States is now, on military nonsense, and
Yes.
they were totally overextended.
Yes.
Their economy was a shambles. It was badly run on socialist, communist principles. They couldn't hold it together, and he brought on the investigation with Glasnost. He asked, for honesty.
Yes.
He tried to be honest, and then it blew up in his face, and the Russian Federation, Mr. Yeltsin took over. And
Sure,
what I'm saying, he's not admired because his country fell apart, and people suffered in the 1990s enormously. That's when so much could have happened. The peace could have continued if the United States had really been interested in peace. That's the moment we could have helped Russia with a Marshall Plan. We wanted communism to go away so badly, and it fell apart, and then we did nothing to help them. What we did was we sent in our marketers, our people, and we made it into a Wild West kind of capitalist cowboy society, and the Russian people suffered greatly. The standard of income dropped enormously. The economy shrank to the size of Holland's economy. Russia was no longer Russia. So when you get that, and people, the living standard, people died earlier from alcoholism, from despair. So I would say those 10 years were shocking. And that's why Mr. Putin came into power. And when he reestablished an organized society, that's Russia got back on its feet economically. So I think you have to understand that's behind the scenes is what's going on and why Putin is popular and why Gorbachev is not. Economic prosperity. But
I understand, but it's, if you can see it, from my point of view, it is always also related to peace, because de Klerk ended apartheid in South Africa. Santos ended the war with the FARC and ended a war for more than 50 years in Colombia.
Yes.
They gave peace to their countries and to the world.
Yes.
But still, they all acknowledge that they lost the support of the people.
It's not that simple. I mean, it's politics, you know. You always have people on the other side who are going to say that the war was, he should not have ended the war in Colombia. With that there's a lot of right-wingers in Colombia, a lot of paramilitary people who want to continue fighting. And it's a society that needs reform. That's what the reason there was a war originally. A necessity for reform, labor laws. That's all through Latin America and Central America. It was going on for years. There's been so many wars down there. And Mr. Reagan, of course, supported the worst elements in Latin America.
You allow me to go back to your early days. Before you went there as a soldier to Vietnam, you went there as a teacher to teach people English.
Yeah.
How did you discover Vietnam? You know, I know people know Vietnam after the war, but you noticed Vietnam before that. Why did you choose that?
I was 19 years old. I went over there because I was at Yale University.
You dropped out?
I dropped out, yeah. I failed out. I was exhausted from, actually, in America we have a boarding school system like in England and Germany, and it was a very tough school. And after 4 years of boarding school of doing that, I was doing the same thing at Yale, and I said I didn't understand why. George Bush was in my class, and it's funny because he survived, and he got a C. He was a C student, and he became president. Yes. So, you know, you don't have to be at the top of your class, as you know. I couldn't take it. I left, and it was there were jobs in the summer in those days, and it was on the bulletin board, and it was just it was an institute in Taipei that was offering a job in Vietnam. My father actually paid for my trip over, airplane ticket, and I got a salary there, a small salary, survived for 2 semesters, and I learned a lot about Vietnam. It was the beginning of the war, '65. And after that, I joined the Merchant Marine as a sailor, as a wiper.
No,
it was hard work. That was in the engine room, you know, all day, hard, sweaty work. And then eventually I get back. I went back to Yale a year later, and I dropped out a second time. I realized it was not for me. I would never make it in that kind of American society.
And then you chose to be in the front line.
At that point, I mean, this is a serious decision. Yes.
Why?
Volunteered for the front combat duty.
And not only, you wanted the front line?
Because I'd seen Vietnam, and I didn't feel like I was a complete person. I don't feel like I had gone to the end of my journey. I felt like a young person is supposed to see the world, supposed to experience things. I'd read a lot of literature at this point, you know, the works of Joseph Conrad, and Ernest Hemingway, among others, James Joyce. I wanted to have an authentic experience of my life, to feel. So I felt this was, I may have been wrong, because I believe I was conservative at this time.
Yes.
And I believed we were doing the right thing in Vietnam, because I felt that I was told by the media that the communists were a danger and so forth. And I didn't see it as a peasant liberation, as a Vietnamese fight for independence. I didn't see that at that point. So I went as a soldier, and what I saw confused me and brutalized me and frankly numbed me. I cannot say that I became like Ron Kovic, somebody who opposed the war. No, I was confused. And it took me several more years in America of talking to people, learning, listening.
You were the son of a soldier too, in World War II.
Yes, and my grandfather too.
And your grandfather too. And also, you remember you were in the war with Vietnam, but not in a normal, even way. You remember the war when the night of the New Year, you were there in that moment. You came back to be a director. How did this takes you to?
It's a little more complicated. When I returned from Vietnam and in the Merchant Marine the first time, I wrote a book. My first effort as a novelist.
Yes.
I wrote a book about my experiences. It was called A Child's Night Dream.
Yes.
Beautiful book in my mind. It was 1,000 pages, and it was undisciplined, and it was rejected. And I went back and I re-edited it 30 years later, and it came out in 1997. But if you want to have a taste of what I was thinking like a 19-year-old, you should read that book. So that will tell you who that kind of person is. And I was still developing, I was still learning. And so that becomes a key point. I didn't really have a trade. I wanted to be a writer, but I didn't want to be a novelist. So this young man said to me, you can go to film school, you can get GI Bill, and you can look at movies. So it wasn't like I knew. I went to film school. There was, one of my teachers was Martin Scorsese, among others, great teachers. And I understood movies more and more because I was watching them and talking about them, studying them and making short films. And that's gradually had this strong desire to be Jean-Luc Godard or Louis Buñuel. But it was not possible. It was still a long haul. You have to walk before you have to crawl before you can walk, and then you have to walk before you can run. It took time to learn.
I wanted to ask, now any director would look up to you.
Oh, not necessarily, but okay.
No, I can promise you that. How is it to feel to see your first movie as something that you've done as a director and see it in the cinema?
It's a wonderful feeling. Unfortunately, the next generation won't have it because we're all into televisions,
demand
and
TV,
home projections.
YouTube.
You guys in the Middle East started buying all those films for your own projection systems. It's too bad. We lost the movies. We lost the movies. It was such a great thing to go into a collective. I still do that. I go to the theaters on weekends and stuff. I'm older, but I enjoy the experience of being with people watching one thing and all of us reacting to it. I do miss that tremendously. I'm one of the last of that generation. My last film, Snowden, didn't do great in theaters, but it did very well all over the world in terms of eyeballs, but that's what the problem is. It's all about eyeballs instead of everything's for free, I don't agree with that system. I think I miss movies in that way that, you just pay a little bit of something to see a movie. It doesn't have to be a lot, but it does help to get the money back.
Let me try here to defend this type of the change that happened. Let me defend YouTube, for example. YouTube is also another thing. We've met Chad Hurley, the co-founder of YouTube, but he said that the reason behind creating such a thing is giving democracy in content development. YouTube and other different platforms made it easier for anyone to develop a content and to take the people that decide whether it's a good content or not. What do you think?
I love the idea of it. I really do, and I think Hurley is I don't know him personally, but he's a hero. YouTube did democratize much of the world. You understand, of course, that film can be manipulated and images can be manipulated. So of course there's going to be a lot of cheating. A lot of politics will come onto YouTube. I produced a film called about Ukraine. I forgot the title right now, but there was another film about Ukraine almost with a similar title on YouTube, and it tells a completely opposite story. It's a very it's very pro-America story about Ukraine, whereas we believe we're telling the truth of what happened in the coup d'etat, where Obama himself admitted that America brokered that coup. So these kind of situations will emerge, and YouTube will be fought over wildly. In America now, we are into this madness of trying to censor Facebook and YouTube and so forth, trying to tell them, look, the Russians are taking over America, they're meddling in our elections, blah, blah, blah. I mean, we're hearing this on Brexit, that they're trying to influence the British. I heard these stupid stories back in the 1950s when I was a kid. Russia was in our schools. Russia was screwing with our head. This was the basis of McCarthyism, you see. It's like, once you get into an ideological political position on YouTube or anywhere, it's going to screw it up. And that's a shame. So in other words, we have to keep it free.
talking about Russia, I'll be in Russia in the few weeks to interview Edward Snowden for the second time.
Who?
Edward Snowden.
Mr. Snowden,
which I've gained his trust from the first season. Now he gave us the chance to be with him in a real interview, let's say.
Oh, that's right. He asked. I saw the end of that when he said he'd give it to you if you came.
Yes.
I bet you got him on that because he hates to do it.
I promised I'll give him the trophy when he comes to Kuwait, but I didn't wait. I went to him.
That's right. If he got out of Russia, he would go to Kuwait. That's right. That's what he's going to have a hard time doing, probably. Tell him about that. No, I don't know if he's going to get out. As you know, I made a movie about him. I admire Ed very much and what he did. I think it's crucial that people understand what the surveillance state is. I tried to show in my film a little bit of it, but it's much bigger than that, and become bigger.
And do you think Russia had Snowden? Because I watched this point of the documentary that you had with Putin. Why do you think the real reason behind Snowden is in Russia?
Oh, I think that's been answered many times, and you should ask Ed himself.
Your point of view.
Well, I believe totally in what Ed's saying. It makes total sense. It was an accidental destination because he was on his way to South America. That was his. He never really planned his exit very well. You have to understand. He had one goal in mind, and once he achieved that goal, which was to give this information to those journalists, he'd achieved what he wanted because the journalists had the information now, and it was up to them to distribute it, which they did. Ed was out of the picture. He allowed for his own. He assumed maybe he'd be killed or he'd be dead. So he didn't really see himself playing an ongoing role. And I'm glad he is because he's very aware of internet reform and surveillance states, and he believes deeply in cryptography, and he's taken a big stand and trying to help the public understand what to encrypt their messages to protect themselves. We need privacy. So, no, the reason he's there is because he was on his way to South America, where he was offered sanctuary, and it was the only way to get from Hong Kong to South America. And of course, it was derailed. The United States heard about it. He was frozen in Russia. He had no passport, with no U.S. passport. Yes. So Russia was very generous in hosting him, and Putin, told us in the documentary, and you have it. He says, the United States asked for him back.
Yes.
And he said no because we had no treaty with the United States to return breaking asylum. We had no treaty, not because we didn't want to. We wanted to negotiate a treaty because there's a lot of criminals in the West from Russia who stole money from the state. So of course they wanted a treaty, but the United States refused to negotiate. And in this case, it backfired on the U.S.
Going back to Edward Snowden in the movie, in your movie, he looked up to Obama as something different from Bush. But you came back and called Obama a wolf wearing sheep cloth, or I don't know the expression.
A wolf in sheep's clothing.
Yes. And that was exactly the same thing that Snowden felt and made him do what he've done. Now, in this book, it ends till Obama. Yeah. If there is a new chapter describing the...
Yes.
I saw the chapter of Kennedy, for example. It says that it's a new point where the world changed. Is Trump now something that will change?
I don't think so. No, I think my colleague, Peter Kuznick, is a historian.
Yes.
We're not going to do another chapter visually,
okay,
only on paper.
Okay.
And we're going to deal with the last 3 years, because it stops in 2013.
Yes.
The last 3 years of Obama and the first year of Mr. Trump.
Yes.
No, I think this has become a huge headline-grabbing issue, but frankly, and Mr. Trump is not my choice for president at all, and I've been very critical of some of the things he's done. So absolutely not, but when I look at Hillary Clinton and the Democrats, I'm also equally appalled. So the Democrats have reacted very badly to losing the election, which was an upset, and blaming Russia, of all people, for having lost the election, when in fact it was the Democrats who lost the election because they didn't offer enough of a program to the American people where they really believed in what the Democrats were doing. Mrs. Clinton was not trusted. This is what people don't understand. She was not trusted because she resembled too much the Wall Street kind of Democrats that we've grown accustomed to. She was also a hawk on foreign policy. She was very much involved in the destruction of Libya, and she crowed about it, and she also basically gave the go-ahead to Syria, to the destruction of the integrity of Syria. This is a woman who's a neoconservative, really, in disguise. So I don't see much hope with the Democrat side, but Mr. Trump is in a continuation of an American deep state. It doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or a Republican at this point. Basically, you have wars in 7 or 8 countries, most of the Muslim countries, and you have a huge commitment to the military budget, and you cannot go back on it seems. And this is what, and the deep state is, when I say the deep state, I'm talking about a policy that's in place. And it doesn't seem to be able to be shifted very much by anybody. Obama tried, apparently. So did Jimmy Carter.
Yes.
So did Bill Clinton. And they got pushed back. There's so much pressure. You see, the American government is become like the old Soviet bureaucracy, which is what Gorbachev complained about. He was locked in. You have all these bureaucrats, they do things a certain way. The military is the worst offender. They have taken control of the state. No one knows this or says it, but they have control of the state. You cannot cut their budgets. You cannot sequester them. How many generals do we have now in Washington? We've reached a place of what I call gridlock.
But at least they come up as a result from democracy, don't you think?
What, the military leaders do not come from democracy?
No, but at least that you can, if you have a question, if you have a no, if you have something that you want to stop in front, you have democracy to use this. But
well, how do you vote if both candidates, Mrs. Clinton and Mr. Trump, are talking about expanding the military, making it greater? Who do you vote? Is there a peace party in the United States? The only peace party I saw was Bernie Sanders, and he didn't talk about it very much. And then Jill Stein, who I voted for, she was a third-party candidate, whose everything she said was, as a policy, has made sense to me for America. But she was a third-party candidate and received a small percentage of the vote. So the American people, maybe they don't want peace. I think they do, but they haven't been offered a reasonable way of going about it.
But isn't America the best example of democracy?
Oh, come on.
What do you think?
I mean, you have free speech here. You have free speech. You can own property. You can come and go. You have free speech, but that doesn't mean you have any influence. I mean, the media is owned by several large corporations. I mean, I don't know how, I can write books, yeah, and I can say the president's but, you can say that in France, too. I mean, in Russia, you can own property, you can come and go, you can have a passport. The only thing is, on politics, there is more restrictions, as there is in your country and most of the countries in the Middle East, and in many countries in Asia. So, the differences are not that gigantic in the end.
Do you believe that there should be a pure democracy?
No, there is no such thing.
No. Is that a goal that a leader should...
I don't think democracy is necessarily so golden, Most people don't think, when they vote, you have a lot of number of people voting, they'd vote to give themselves more money. They vote for their own self-interest. That's not necessarily a good thing. You need leadership. You need people who frame issues for them that they can understand in a way that, I think if you can make your case for the public, it's the best solution.
Don't you think?
The problem is if the media is not working with you and they ridicule everything you say, or they don't, for example, this could not be seen. This was seen in many countries on national television. This could not be seen on American national television. It could be seen on a premium cable station. Do you understand the difference?
Yeah.
This is it's a very limited democracy when you have sports events and advertising and game shows as the prime communication with people in this country.
التاريخ الذي لم يكتب عن أمريكا هو عنوان لكتاب يفتخر به جدا أوليفر ستون، فصنعوا منه مكتوب ومشاهد كفيلم وثائقي. هذا الكتاب عانى له الكثير، ففيه وضع جميع قناعاته، حتى أنه تكلم عن تاريخ بلدي الكويت، وتكلم عن حادثة الغزو والتحرير بوجهة نظره الشخصية، ولكن كان لزاما عليه أن يسمع وجهة نظري، فهو يتكلم عن بلدي وعن حالة حرب واجهناها وخضناها. رغم ذلك أصر على وجهة نظره، لذلك أصريت بأن هذا الكتاب ليس إلا إعادة لكتابة التاريخ بوجهة نظره الشخصية، بوجهة نظر أوليفر ستون. You started as a teacher, and then this is one of your last projects that you've done. Also, you wanted this to be taught in schools. as a book. I think I told you that before. I think in this book you rewrite history, and he wasn't happy for this comment. Don't you think that you rewrite history in this book?
No. What we have taken is Peter Kuznick has taught history at American University for 40 years. He's a professor, and he's written about the nuclear bomb, the atomic bomb, the science, and we took all the facts that have been presented in a certain way and presented those same facts in a different pattern so that our students would understand that American policy, domestic and foreign, has essentially been aggressive since World War II.
Let me tell you why. I will not discuss something.
Oh, we're going to go to Kuwait now. Good, yeah, I'm fine.
I will jump to Kuwait, if you don't mind. You said that the war was built, I'll say exactly what you said. So by the time the fraud was exposed, US bombing of Baghdad had already begun. Yes, there were some wrong, false stories.
There was a lot of fraud.
But still, I am from Kuwait, and I tell you that maybe the only war that the people of the country are happy of America.
Of course they're happy. Of course they're happy because it was presented to them that way. The point we try to make in the book, listen,
yes,
and it's a simple point, is that negotiation was possible.
Yes.
And and Bush was not interested in negotiation because Mr. Gorbachev had just ended communism. There was no motivation for us to continue a militarized state that we had in America. He was looking for an action right away that could unite Americans and keep this American military state going. And that happened right away with Noriega. He attacked Noriega right away. And when the Berlin Wall came down a month or so later, he was attacking Panama and getting the Americans riled up, calling them all kinds of a dictator, this, that. And then when Kuwait happened, and by the way, there's a lot of evidence to the fact that the American ambassador gave the go-ahead to Hussein to go into Kuwait. And Kuwait's a whole other fractured story. I'm not going to go into the length of that one, but you know damn well that Kuwait was considered an oligarchy by many people. The point is that America hyped the threat, and that's what they do. They told the Saudi Arabians, and they showed them pictures, satellite pictures, of what they called Hussein's troops on the border of Saudi Arabia, saying that it would implying that they would invade Saudi Arabia. There's no proof of that, and those troops were not there in the maps that they showed them. Newsweek pointed that out in a very famous cover story. It was also revealed that there was quite a bit of fraud in the public relations department. You hired, I forgot the name of the firm, Hill & Knowlton, or one of those big ones, and you paid a fortune, Kuwait. Not you. You paid a fortune, and there was quite a bit of lying going on about Iraqi soldiers killing babies in hospitals, and you used a young woman, I forgot the details, a young woman was on television in America making people cry. They always love that, to make people cry, make them sentimental. That always works, and she was on television, and they threw my baby into an incinerator or something. I mean, it was lies, and you worked it up, and he barely got a mandate. Because, and at that time, remember, the Russians, I forgot exactly who, but it's the same European players that later, that could stop the war, tried to stop the war in Iraq, the real war in 2004, tried to get the negotiations going. Hussein indicated that he would withdraw, he would negotiate. It was all about money and oil, but what did Bush want? He wanted to get, how many people did he put in the Middle East? This is very important to our history. 500,000 American troops were sent over quickly before anybody could change their mind. 500,000 troops. Have we ever gotten out of the Middle East? This is a huge decision, Othman, really. I mean, when I went to Vietnam, it was when they had 500,000 American troops in Vietnam, there was a tremendous acknowledgement that this is wrong. There was a feeling that we've done too much. Not since World War II have we ever had troops overseas in any large amount until Vietnam. And now, after Vietnam, which had been a disaster, we suddenly, within 20 years, are back in the Middle East with 500,000 troops. We never got out. And wasn't that one of the main problems when bin Laden, in his statements, when he attacked America? Yes. He said the American troops in Mecca and the American troops in the Middle East was a major problem. So I think we created more war and more terror, and we could have solved the situation with negotiation.
don't know if I'll have the opportunity to meet you again, so this is why I'll say this. I understand what you're trying to say here. And I also heard Gorbachev himself saying that there was a way in peace with Saddam. He answered that exact question.
Good.
But still, I know two things. First is that never happened in the Middle East. Sometimes people like Saddam Hussein are not out, even if they say the word. This is one. Two, maybe it was a false story, the lady that took whatever happened in the hospital. But things like that happened really in Kuwait. So when a Kuwaiti guy like me, I know we are not huge in the world, we're only 1.2 million, but when we read this chapter and we see how you explained the situation in Kuwait that is built on a fraud. We lost democracy, at least the democracy that we loved. The tiny democracy that we had. We lost the many rights that we had. We saw blood in the street. We are a peaceful country. So for us, we think that America took the right decision that day to take them out. Maybe they're the reason, as you said. Maybe they gave the green light for Saddam. But we believed what happened that day.
I'm sure you're interested because you got your country back and the rich people got back into the country. But the problem is it set up a whole pattern of intervention in the Middle East that has been a disaster, not only for America, but for the entire world. This is that war, if it had not happened, we would not be in this mess that we're in now. With how many countries is America fighting in? Do you think, I mean, there's always self-interested people in those countries that say, oh, good for America has to come to our country and bomb it and change the administration and I can get richer and do this or that. There's always people who will be collaborators with America, but that is not in America's interest. And we know there's been too much lying about the Iraq War.
And is America the policeman of the world?
What? No, it isn't, and it shouldn't be, and unfortunately, if it behaves like it, it's going to get its kicked and handed to it. It's not going to work.
Do you feel, what's the future of the strong American?
Well, unfortunately, the way it's acting now with Mr. Trump and the military, it looks like more war, and this is not good for anybody.
Please, I want to one time talk about movies. We talked a lot about
well, I've made movies about war too.
Now, how did you use those movies? Yeah, I know that you said the truth, the history, but I think also you said your point of views. How do you look to your movies? Are they something that you lived, something that you want to say to the world?
Yeah, I wouldn't have done them otherwise.
No, but some other directors do something else to make entertainment, to give a smile.
That is, the movies are entertaining. So I enjoy the documentaries too. No, I think it's my form of entertainment. I think, Born on the 4th of July is, as you said, a harsh film. It's a hard film, but you see what one bullet can do to a man's life. One bullet, you don't need a lot of weaponry. It broke his spine, severed his spine. So I think that may not be entertainment to you, but to me it's an important entertainment because it's important that movies transfer knowledge to us, and I try to do it as in an exciting way as possible. I don't like those movies where the director takes 3 hours to show a little action. I do like action-oriented, fast-cut movies. So I'm one of those people, American style, gang bang, gang bang. But there's no reason. JFK, I mean, who'd do the shooting of a president? A man gets killed, shot in the head, for Christ's sake. But I think that was an important story. But it's also an exciting story. You understand what I'm saying? I mean, yes. People did Westerns in the old days. They killed the Indians and they didn't think about it. That wasn't entertainment, but it made money.
And by saying...
And by the way, they kill a lot of Arabs in American movies still,
Yes.
And they cheer about it.
And this is one of the reasons why I wear this. We only see this look, either
so they won't
a terrorist.
Shoot you.
At least we do something
else. Well, they know you're one of the Kuwait. You're one of their collaborators. That's why.
I hope not. So, going back to, we talked about how you look to the movies, how you express your opinions through movies. Also, how you want to share this with them. Why do you go to books? You do. What's the difference between doing it in a book or doing it in a movie?
Well, I would say this is more Peter Kuznick's domain. I would prefer to do a movie. Yeah, but I'm going to write a memoir. I've written a novel, and I told you A Child's Night Dream, and I'm now going to do a memoir of all this action, all these years, to explain things. I think there's places for books, a nonfiction book. I just love movies. For me, when I went to Vietnam, put it this way, you know, I was dealing with what was in front of me, to the side, to the back, 360. It's intense. I'm all involved. It's like a virtual reality, I suppose. And I don't get that quite on paper. I don't get that sense, although I have an imagination. And I love reading, but I feel like movies can really put you in the environment and the atmosphere completely.
You chose to be the director and the writer for each movie.
Not always, co-writer sometimes.
Yeah, I know, but still you had your influence
I'm a writer.
In writing. This combination between being a director and why do you insist on doing this?
Sometimes it's easier just to be a director, but I just always was that way. That's the way I started. I wrote my first 2 horror films myself. They were based on my dreams. And, well, actually, my first horror film, my second one was based on a book, which was a very well-written book by someone else. So I use other people's heads, their talent. I like collaboration very much, too.
We tried to link every movie that you've done to something that you lived. So,
to some degree, yes, it's true.
So just now, you said your horror movie, one of them came out of
yes,
a
another
bad
person's
dream.
book. Yes.
So and also a bad dream, you said, the first one.
That was my dream, the first one, yes.
Okay. So now looking for Wall Street, we tried to link it with something. Then we said, is it because he worked in France for a period of time in coffee? You know.
You heard about that, the coffee and cocoa exchange. Yeah.
Yes, with his grandmother after your parents' divorce.
No, it was.
Is it the right method? Is it the way we look up to what did Oliver Stone lived, and that movie is a result? Yeah, that's the result of that movie.
I think it's better if a director or writer-director is connected to the material and has a personal view of it. That gives you the passion, you're saying. And in other words, there are a lot of directors, I know them, Hollywood directors, who take the biggest book that sold that year, for example, a bestseller, and then make a movie out of it. That can be done, and they can do it very professionally, but your heart's not quite, it's not the same thing as if you participated in the story to some degree.
So, you said that it's a yes, so it's an answer. So every movie should be related to somewhere that you
didn't say should. I don't like the word should. I think has been in my case, has been related to something in my life. My father worked on Wall Street for almost his whole life. So it was about my father too, and about his mood, and about the mood of Wall Street, which fascinated me because it was so different from what I was. You know, people buying and selling every day. I don't understand though. You know, I could never do that, but I wanted to make a movie about it.
ضيفنا أوليفر ستون غادر ميادين الحرب كجندي، إلا أنه حافظ على صفة الدفاع، فهو دفاعي منذ ذاك اليوم حتى يومنا هذا. رغم أنه حقق الإنجازات، إلا أنه يواجه يوميا بانتقادات في كل أعماله، فهو صاحب الرأي النشاز هنا في الشارع الأمريكي. هاجم مصممة المكياج بالفريق ومدير التصوير والمخرج وحتى أنا كمقدم لهذا البرنامج، وهددني بأني لا أسأل سؤالا عن أي عمل دون أن أكون شاهدته مرة ومرتين وثلاث. تفهمت هذا الدفاع وهذه الروح الدفاعية، لأنه من بذل حياته ليس للمال أو تحقيق الشهرة، بل لطرح وجهات النظر وحماية الإنسانية، هكذا يعرف أعماله. فلذلك كان من المستحق التساؤل: لماذا تخلو هوليوود من أفلام تخوض بمشاكلنا نحن العرب؟ نعم، هو سؤال مستحق، ولكن أيضا توقعت ردة فعل دفاعية أو حتى هجومية من محارب قديم. You defended your son when he chose to be a Muslim, and I think it has an impact on you. So one of the things that we miss in Hollywood is seeing something that defends Muslims. For example, in Palestine, or yes, we know that Hitler did many bad things to Jewish people, but we saw plenty of movies talking about that. When will we see a movie that talks about a story that happened in the Middle East defending an Arab victim?
Yes, I can't tell you because you have to understand the United States is deeply involved with Israel and has been since World War II, and the tie is getting stronger and stronger, and it's very dangerous. You know, Mr. Trump completely seems to be in the pocket of Mr. Netanyahu. So it's really getting bad now. And Clinton, too, Hillary Clinton promised that she was going to take the relationship between America and Israel to the next level. That's what she said, to the next level. So there's no way out. There's no possibility of a peace process of any. And it seems to me like, it seems like the Indian, it's the American Indians all over again. The land is gone, reservation time is about it. So I don't know enough about the Middle East. I've only done one documentary there, Persona non grata, actually, where I went to both sides. I interviewed Mr. Arafat briefly.
Yes.
And I interviewed several of the Israeli leaders, including Netanyahu. It seemed like an insoluble problem. I went to Ramallah. I almost got caught there in the... But, Exodus comes to mind. That was a huge movie made in the 1950s. It was very popular, and that was made by Mr. Preminger. And it was about the Jews going to Israel in the boats. A very powerful movie. And there has been nothing like that in the Arabic world that I've seen. I saw no, I can't say and I don't know that story. I'm sure there are, and it's up to an Arabic filmmaker to do it.
And this is also something important for me. Do you think, because this is what we miss, we want people to say our stories, but it is our job to do it. So I want to hear from you, why is it important for a nation to have a movie industry, to a film industry?
Well, if it's a good one, it won't be propagandistic, you see. It has to be more international, more broad. And I think American movies are now tipping into this pro-American propaganda. It's very dangerous, and I think it signals the end. I think movies are in crisis that way.
Look, I ask you about movie industry, and you reply with politics. So just tell me. Now,
well, you asked a political question. You said, why are they not making Arabic movies? And I was telling you that the division that exists in the Arabic countries is enormous. They can't agree among themselves, and they betray themselves.
But I'm asking about something simple.
But that's what you asked me about. Why are they not making a movie?
Yeah, about not...
That's what I'd make a movie about, betrayal.
I'm talking about a very simple thing that we see all over the news. A simple child dead because of bullets, because he's defending his lands.
Iran made some very nice films. Have you seen the Iran films?
Yes.
They don't make those in Saudi Arabia. Why not? The Iranians have a sensibility that I don't see.
I'm asking about Hollywood.
I'm asking about sensibility, film sensibility. Sure. Are we finished? It's been more than an hour here.
Yeah, we just ended with a gift. So we have a gift for you.
I enjoyed it, sir.
Thank you very much.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful.
It represents the program identity. We travel all over the world to share other
What is it?
stories.
A boat? A dhow. A dhow.
Yes.
From 8th century.
This is before the oil, before we became rich. This is how we traveled all over the world to...
Yeah, beautiful. What is this, gold leaf?
If it was gold, no, I think it's metal painted with gold.
Oh, I can't sell it. No, it's really lovely.
Good. Thank you very much again.
Thank you, Omar.
Thank you. Thank you very much. ومخرج يهابه الرؤساء أو حتى أكثر من ذلك. منذ اللحظات الأولى وهو أراد أن يفرض سيطرته على اللقاء، غير مواقع الكاميرات وهددني ضمنيا بقول بأنه من طرد آخر مقدم للبرامج التقى به في مصر، لكني لم أهابه لأنني آمنت برسالته. هو من حول صناعة الأفلام إلى رسالة يوصل بها مفاهيمه وقناعاته للعالم. لقاء ملؤه صراع، ولكنه أتى بالنتيجة النهائية بأنك قد تصل للسلطة من بوابات مختلفة، أفضلها صناعة الأفلام. شكرا أوليفر ستون، شكرا لكم للمتابعة.